You cannot just do this business. Please start with planning and zoning. Like, do not assume that any single piece of property, it is possible to start a wedding venue.
Uno, dos, tres.
You feel so kind of speak to how you feel like the industry is changing, because there's certainly an influx of new venues, but what about the venues that are going out of business? What about all the cancellations and the reschedulings? And I mean, I've seen so many venues that are choosing, or other maybe wineries, or the Del Mar Fairgrounds here in San Diego, Southern California. They're choosing not to do weddings for a couple of seasons. So now all of a sudden there's this big push. Couples have to find new venues. Are you seeing that in your part of the country as well? Do you feel like that's going to change?
Here's what I expect to happen. I expect to see, especially depending on how the market is impacted in 2021, I expect to see more venues go up for sale. It's quietly happening in a lot of cases behind the scenes. One of my coaching clients actually said something really interesting. She said, Kristin, before I bought a venue, I called all of the venues in my market. My numbers might be just a little wrong here because this is from memory. But she said, I called all of the venues in my market. Do you know how many were willing to sell? 7.
Wow.
None of them were publicly for sale, right? So, I think that there's people who got into this business and it looked like an easy, fun cash cow, and it's not. That hasn't been their experience, is what I would say.
Mhm.
I think that there's people who got into this business, built something great, and didn't realize like how locationally stuck you are when you own a building, and that's you don't get to travel the world. Like, it's hard to move, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's hard to
Yep.
move.
Totally.
And so kind of, I could be wrong, but here's my perspective on it. I think we are at the top of, I think there's going to be some venues that are for sale, quietly for sale. I think we're going to see, especially if we see another round of cancellations, more publicly for sale, more shutdowns potentially, or excuse me, more closures potentially happen. I think that's going to devalue the businesses that are for sale because there's more for sale, right?
Mhm.
So,
Supply
and I
chain
think,
again.
yeah, exactly. And I think that, the amount of debt that a business has is going to have some impact on that too. 2020 was a lot harder for venue owners who have just a mountain of debt and having to deal with reschedules and having to deal with refunds and having to, you know what I mean? It becomes a lot. So it becomes a lot.
As someone who coaches venue owners, and I'm fascinated to talk to you about this, because we're talking about new venues and we're talking about maybe older venues. If you're someone who's coming into any market and you're going to say, I'm passionate about this, or maybe you just have this crazy idea that you want to own a wedding venue and you're super naive, right? You've never done anything like this, but you're so excited and you want to do it, right? And I think that's where a lot of our business ideas start. We're like, I could do this, I could do that. There's a need, or you feel like there's a need. What would be your number one piece of advice for a brand new wedding venue owner, never has owned something in the wedding venue space or event space? What do you have, kind of like a one big one, like it's going on the poster board?
Can I have 2?
Of
Can I please
course.
have 2?
Do
Okay.
3. If you want to do 3, I love it. Let's 3. What are your top 3?
So, number 1 is, so many people get into this business because they want to. And I'm not saying at all that that's not a great reason to get into this business, but extremely closely followed behind that needs to be like, does the market need another venue?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and what is the void? What is the market need? Not just what you want as a person, because what I see so many venues do is build a space that they like, that they want, but they're not their ideal client. Right. So then all of a sudden you find yourself in this position of having to sell what you've got as opposed to giving the market what it needs. So that's like that's kind of my big mission, I would say, in life. The other thing I just have to say is, oh my gosh, you cannot just do this business. Please start with planning and zoning. Like, do not assume that any single piece of property, it is possible to start a wedding venue. The number of venues that have been shut down, who are operating illegally, sometimes they don't even know it. When I get on a potential coaching call with a client, one of the first questions we ask every single person is, are you legal to host weddings? And we ask that question because, number one, I don't want to help somebody grow their business and that they could be shut down. That's going to hurt them. That's going to hurt their couple. So that's one thing. But we also ask that question from a service to the industry perspective, because you'd be surprised. Sometimes new venue owners, the response we get is like, oh yeah, we're out in the country, it'll be fine. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, back up, don't pass go, don't collect $200. You have to find out if this is possible. For context, our original build was an open air pavilion. You could literally walk out 30 foot one side, no wall, no barriers. And we had to have $100,000 sprinkler system before we could even open our doors. And basically we were a roof, you know what I mean? So the things that people don't know what to look for, but gosh, make sure it's possible. Don't get into a contract on a piece of property if you haven't done your homework.
Do you
Yeah.
see a lot of people going and buying properties, or more of your experience and your experience pool with are folks who maybe they had a wonderful piece of land, they've hosted a couple family and friends, maybe a few folks from their church, and then they're like, we could do this more. This is, great. I looked at some of the other wedding venues on the Knot or Wedding Wire, like I could do this. And then they just kind of fall into it that way. Do you see one or the other more?
I'd say it's pretty 50-50. You
Okay.
know, the barriers to entry are lower if you already own the property. But a lot of people who I notice are building like big purpose-built spaces are usually finding a location.
Mm. So uh, I guess what I'm hearing is that it might be better to actually hire you prior to even buying the property and buying the building if you're going to go that route, correct? Because then you can help avoid a lot of different pitfalls.
Yeah, so stay tuned for some things coming on
Okay.
that question. But what I would say for now, and hopefully this is appropriate, I have a Facebook group where a lot of these kind of potential venue owner topics are talked about. And I have lots of videos like, don't pass go, don't collect $200, go talk to planning and zoning, even all the way down to, understanding at the county level, like right where we're at. I could throw a rock and hit two other major counties in the St. Louis metro market. Our rules are extremely different between the three counties. So even choosing your location based on the understanding of like how venues operate at a county level can be really important. It can be a competitive advantage or not, quite frankly.
You said something actually in the first time that we actually met on that Clubhouse thing. And by the way, the Facebook groups and everything, we're gonna actually have a little section later where everyone can go find you. All of your links are going to be in the description. So for anyone on YouTube watching this or listening to podcasts, like you're going to want to check this out because Kristin does have so many amazing resources, Facebook groups, obviously coaching, and the content that she puts out is really cool. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, dropping things like that, we love it. But I was going to say one of the first conversations we had was about zoning and about, I loved that you brought up that there are such huge differences in counties. You could have one county that's, especially during this time, that's totally open and is allowing weddings and events, and then another one right next door that maybe they aren't allowing it, but they aren't enforcing not doing it. And then the other one that is completely open. So really understanding the local feel of how, the city ordinances and everything, county ordinances are going are really, really important. When you say start with zoning, where practically does someone start? Is someone going down to the office, or nowadays, maybe just going online and looking up things? What was kind of like a first step for some folks?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I wish that there was like a perfect path to walk. There's not. The best advice that I can give people if you're serious about getting into this business, reach out to, if you're in the city limits, reach out to the city. If you're not in the city limits, reach out to the county. There could be some state requirements as well. What's dangerous, I think, is sometimes people will call the planning and zoning department and they'll ask the question like, I want to open a wedding venue, what do I need to do? And the person who answers the phone says, oh yeah, there's nothing that you need to do, you're fine. And they take that at face value, right? And that person means well, because maybe there's nothing that you need to do, but there's literally, it takes one complaining neighbor with a deep pocketbook to find something in the code book to argue with you about. And all of a sudden you're so far down this path, you spent $40,000 with an architect or whatever, and now the neighbor found out you're going to do this, and they do not. They do not want you to be their neighbor. This is, I would also say, especially true when I notice people buying property. When you're looking for property, people want something beautiful and serene and peaceful. And just reminder, you're moving next to somebody who loves their own beautiful, serene and
Sorry,
peaceful.
yeah.
Right? You may not want noise and drunks and light pollution and all of the things that we potentially bring as venues. So being really mindful that a phone call is great. Get as much in writing as you can. It's a really good idea to have an attorney in the mix in that. And one thing that you said that I think is really interesting, sometimes venue owners or potential venue owners are so happy because there's no rules. And here's what I'll say about that. Did it stink that we had to spend $100,000 on a fire suppression system? Yeah. But what's good about that is it's a barrier to entry. So when you look at markets that have no rules versus markets that have a lot of regulation, what you'll notice is markets that have no rules. So Southwest Missouri is an example of this. Throw a rock and you will hit a wedding venue because they literally don't even have building codes. You can build whatever you want in many areas down there. And so the cost to build is substantially less.
Mhm.
That sounds great from a venue owner's perspective, right? That also means there's no barriers to entry from 82 other people doing it on the 82 properties next door. So I'm grateful that we're in a more regulated market, both from a safety perspective for our guests, but also just from a barrier to entry perspective and business perspective.